Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Ted O'Toole, and I welcome you to MZMC, especially if you've never been to one of our Dharma talks before. A warm welcome to you. Come on in. Well, I brought in some peppers today from my garden, and I'm going to pass these around, suitable for eating or maybe putting on your altar as a food offering, maybe. So these are the habaneros. Watch out for these. You don't want to touch these and then touch your eyes. They're really hot. We got a couple of jalapenos. They're pretty hot. Got these poblanos. Poblanos are not supposed to be hot, but I think they cross-pollinated with the habaneros. And a few bell peppers, so I'll pass those around. Feel free to take one. And yeah, it's been a really good year for peppers. Seems like it's been a bit of a kind of a strange fall. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. But it just seems like a couple of odd things have been going on, and it's kind of set me to musing about how our Zen practice can help us during strange or difficult times, which is one of my favorite topics. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. The weather's been kind of unusual. I mean, maybe unusual weather is the usual now, but it's been such a great year weather-wise because we got so much rain in the spring here in Minnesota. And, you know, we were in a drought situation and we got all that rain and we really came out of the drought. It's been a great year for tomatoes and peppers and the corn and the soybeans and everything. And then in September, we had the driest and hottest September on record. And it was, well, we're kind of back, you know, kind of getting back into drought conditions. And of course, there are other people suffering a lot more than that, you know, folks in places like Florida and Georgia and North Carolina having terrible problems right now. And my heart really goes out to them. And, you know, I really love October. September and October, new things happen. People go back to school. Our programming really ramps up here at MZMC. And there's a sense of new things beginning. And then it starts to get a little cold, you know, and you get that first jacket weather. And it's a little bit kind of cozy. And those two things together, and you have the leaves falling. And I just really love that. And but this year, it's really hot, and it feels like, you know, it's not a proper October. It's like we've been robbed a little bit. We're not getting the right October. But it seems to be happening now. This morning, it's actually really cold. There's a cold wind coming off the lake, and you can hear the wind. And I know it's best to take it as it comes, right? I should know this as a Zen teacher. but I miss the proper October a bit. And then a second thing that was kind of unusual is that I was a little sick. Nothing terrible. I caught COVID for the second time, and I'm fully recovered, I think, maybe just a little residual fatigue, and my voice is a little scratchy. It kind of wants to go to that growly place. It's not really my usual voice. And COVID for me, it was never terrible, and I was able to work at least a few hours a day throughout, but it was kind of annoying. The fatigue lasted for about 4 weeks. I wasn't able to go to a Zen conference that I had hoped to go to in Philadelphia. I missed a lot of meetings here. I'm still way behind on my emails. And I thank everyone for their patience if I haven't gotten back to you. But the turning point was just a week ago, we had initiation here, and we had 10 people initiated. This is also known as Jukai, where people take vows in front of the community. And it was just beautiful, such a lovely ceremony of, you know, the whole the whole place coming together. And I just got all my enthusiasm back, you know, it's like, oh, I'm so lucky I get to do what I do. I'm so happy to be able to be here at Zen Center and do all of these little things. And I'm thinking now, looking back, like, wow, I was kind of down when I was sick, you know, I was getting a little discouraged there. And it's kind of strange how down we can get when we're in the throes of something. It's like we can't see our way out. It's like we maybe shouldn't even trust our own perspective. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. So being sick was a bit of a learning experience. People kept telling me to take care of myself and take it easy, and I really appreciated that. It just, as I said, it just reminded me of how great daily life is, you know, when you come out of it. It feels so good to be feeling good again. And like, oh, all the stuff I normally do, that is really precious. I really missed that. And, you know, we've had a Dharma transmission here. Ji Ryu and Kato received Dharma transmission. We'll celebrate that next week with a tea. We had that initiation. Practice period has started. I'm teaching that with Evan, and I'm meeting with everyone, and it's just great. So there's the weather. I was a little sick. What else is going on this fall? Well, there's the election. That's my standard face. And, you know, I haven't really talked about the election. I feel like maybe I really don't need to. I mean, everybody knows there's an election. Everybody knows it's really important. There's a 99% chance you already know who you're going to vote for if you haven't voted already. You know, but there is that fear factor, and that is something to talk about. Anyone who's paying attention is afraid. And the people who have the opposite political opinion from you, they're as afraid of you as you are of them. And no one knows what's going to happen. No one knows. It is impossible to know. I'm pretty optimistic myself, but I can't be sure. So I have two bits of advice about the election, which you may take or not take, as you please. But number one, obviously, I think your Zen practice can help you during this difficult time. And, you know, more meditation and other forms of practice, they can help you to be less agitated. They can help you to be more focused. And I'm talking about Zen practice now, not as a means of escape, but really as a means of engagement. Number two is this principle that I've kind of derived during my long period of time on this planet about dealing with fear. And that is, you always feel better when you're going up against it. Because sometimes we're kind of on the run from life, and sometimes we're leaning into life. And if you're on the run from life, you're worried about things and you think about things and you disengage and you don't do much, and then you worry more, and it's a self-perpetuating cycle. And if you lean into life, you do something, and you feel good about having made the effort, and maybe you have a little success and you do more stuff, and that too can be a self-perpetuating cycle. So my advice is to make that effort, lean into it, be active if you have the bandwidth. Sometimes we do have to take care of ourselves and do less, but if you can, lean into it. I think being active in the electoral process, well, it's our civic duty. It's good Zen practice, because with Zen practice, we take care of things on all levels, from what's right in front of us, to what's good for our Sangha, to what's good for our city, to what's good for the entire planet. But it also makes you feel better when you're being active. It's good for the spirit. So if you want your chosen candidates to win, and I make no assumptions about who that might be, it seems to me that things are so close that the deciding factor could be just who turns out the vote. And that's something people can do. There are lots of ways to help with turning out the vote. You know, I think you could probably go to a candidate's website and find out, you know, some people make phone calls, they send postcards, they knock on doors and things like that. Also, second bit of practical advice, it's not too late to give money to candidates. And this is something that Kathy and I like to do. We do a lot of research and we look at all the different candidates and try to figure out which races are most crucial and where our money can make the most difference. And we send our money to a lot of different candidates, which might mean only a little bit for each candidate, but we like to have some skin in the game. And then when we do that, when we send some money to somebody, I go to their website and I print off their picture and we put their picture up on our back door, their sliding glass door. So we've got about 20 pictures up there. So we've got our wall of hopefuls there. And it's fun. It's fun. And it makes us feel like we're part of the thing, like we're doing something. So those were my preliminary musings about the strange fall. And now I would like to talk a little bit about Hui-Neng. Hui-Neng. So, practice period. The book we're using is called the Platform Sutra. Here it is, also known as the Zen teaching of Hui-Neng, translated with commentary by Red Pine, and it's a really good book. We have about 40 people in practice period. It's a lot of fun. This is called the Platform Sutra because Hui-Neng, as a teacher, and his predecessor, they sat on a platform, just like I'm doing. Not as a hierarchical thing, but just so you can see me. And Hui-Neng lived in China from 638 to 713. He was known as the sixth patriarch. So he was the sixth in this particular lineage. It started with Bodhidharma in China. He was the first, and then Hui-Neng was the sixth. And this is the only Chinese sutra. Most sutras are the words of the Buddha, but these are the words of Hui-Neng, and it's the only Chinese sutra. It's a really important work. And there's a story at the heart of it that many of you have heard because it's one of the most famous stories in Zen. The fifth patriarch, whose name was Hong Ren or Hung Zhen, was ready to retire. And so he wanted to name a successor. And so he initiated a poetry contest. And the person who wrote the poem demonstrating the most insight into Zen would be his successor. And so the practice instructor, his name was Shen Shu. He was like the head monk in this huge monastery with maybe 1,000 monks in it. He wrote a poem and he put it up on the wall. And it was a bit of a pedestrian poem. And it was about how the mind is like a mirror and you should keep the mind clear of dust, which is a pretty good practice, but a lot of people think that didn't really go far enough. So then this guy, Hui-Neng, comes along and he writes a second poem. And he says, there is no mirror, there is no dust, which is a very Zen view because it's not about sort of practicing and trying to sort of obliterate thoughts and sensations or work toward a future state. It's about being vividly alive right now, and that's all there is. So he wrote this poem that just kind of exploded Shen Shu's view. And this is a very Mahayana view, a very Zen view, and really a revolutionary moment in Zen. And as it turns out, you know, we talk a lot about how both of these approaches have value. But a lot of people think Shen Shu didn't go far enough. Hui-Neng took it further. And so that story gets really a lot of attention. And that's the most famous story in the Platform Sutra, but there's a lot more in here. And what I'd like to talk about this morning is this kind of strange incident that happens after the poetry contest. And I'm not talking about this so much to explain the sutra, which is kind of why I'm doing it as a Sunday talk and not part of practice period. It's just kind of an example I'd like to use to help me with my attempt to talk about how to deal with difficult or stressful times. So Hung Jen, the fifth patriarch, called Hui-Neng into his office, and he explained the Diamond Sutra to him, and Hui-Neng instantly awakened. And then the fifth patriarch gave him his robe and his bowl and said, "You are my successor." And then he said the most surprising thing. He said, "Hui-Neng, since ancient times, the lives of those to whom this teaching has been transmitted have hung by a thread." What? "If you stay here, someone will harm you. You must leave at once. You're my successor, you're in danger, get out of here." And that's pretty hard to believe. You know, how could this be? Is this story true? I don't know. They seem to document things pretty well back then. I think it may be true. Well, for one thing, it's a reminder that Zen practitioners can be very human and that we shouldn't idealize our communities too much. If we do, we'll be unrealistic and we will definitely be disappointed. But the fifth patriarch clearly knew that the monks in the monastery would be threatened by this move. So imagine the monastery, there are maybe 1,000 monks there. This is where they live. This is their way of life. Shen Shu is their established leader, the second in command, and they expect him to take over. And this is their established way of life. And then you have Hui-Neng showing up. And I'll tell you a little more about Hui-Neng. He's very new. He's been in the monastery, I think maybe it's 9 months, I'm not sure, not that long. He's illiterate. He doesn't know how to read. When he showed up, he was given the job of milling rice. He went to this special room for milling rice, and he used this contraption, which is kind of like a bicycle where you pedal and it crushes or mills the rice. And by the way, that device is still there. You can still see it in that monastery, along with Hui-Neng himself, who has been preserved. But that's a strange and different story. So this illiterate guy shows up, he's milling rice, and there's an element of ethnic bias here. So when Hui-Neng first showed up, Hung Jen, in this incredibly insensitive moment, refers to him as a jungle rat, because Hui-Neng, according to Red Pine, is very likely a member of a tribe from South China that was not Han Chinese. So he's saying, you're an outsider. Can you imagine? So we have this illiterate migrant from the South who challenges their leader, maybe challenging their whole way of life. And perhaps it's easy for them to focus all of their fears on him. And that's what they do. And they get up a mob. And so after Hui-Neng gets the robe and the Dharma, the fifth patriarch accompanies him to a ferry, and he says, the fifth patriarch says, "Go now and do your best to take the Dharma south, but don't spread this teaching for 3 years. Wait until the hard times are over before you go around teaching. And be skillful when you guide those who are deluded. Once they are able to open their minds, they are no different than those who are enlightened." So he sends him off. And then, less than 2 months later, Hui-Neng writes, "I reached Taiyu Ridge. Unknown to me, several hundred people had been chasing me, hoping to catch me and take away the patriarch's robe." Several hundred monks had been chasing him, wanting to take away the robe and the bowl, and possibly to do him harm. So this is really a big setup for a climactic moment, right? What's going to happen here? Several hundred monks are chasing him. It's been 2 months. he's reached this ridge, and what happens? We're on the edge of our seat, right? What happens? Well, not very much. He says, but they had all given up halfway, all except one monk, whose surname was Chen and whose Buddhist name was Hui-Shun. He had previously been a general, a high-ranking general, and he was a rough character. He caught up with me at the ridge, and I offered him the patriarch's robe, but he wouldn't take it. He said, I've come all this way for the Dharma. I don't want the robe. So I transmitted the Dharma to Hui-Shun there at the ridge. He was ready to hear, and as soon as I spoke, his mind opened up. Then I told him to go back north and teach the others. So the not much is why I'm using this story here, precisely because it's so anticlimactic. Several hundred people were chasing him, but they just gave up. One person persisted, and he had a change of heart, and there was kind of a beautiful reconciliation. And I don't know if Hui-Neng had been worried. Maybe he wasn't aware of those people chasing him. I don't know if he had been worried, but it all turned out pretty well. True, Hui-Neng didn't get to teach for 3 years, and he had to relocate, but maybe that extra time was good seasoning for him to get him ready. So this story reminds me of those times in my life when I've anticipated something in the future. Some terrible thing loomed in the future for me, and the anticipation of it just took over my life. I don't know, has this ever happened to you? I worried and I obsessed, and then finally, the event came, and it proved to be nowhere near as horrible as I had anticipated. As Macbeth said, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And I look back and I go, wow, I really wasted a lot of time and energy there, worrying about this thing, which just turned out to be this thing. I thought it was going to be so much more than this thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everything will be fine always, and so don't worry. Sometimes things aren't fine. I'm not naive about it. But it is important to look back and realize how sometimes we see that all of the obsessing was really extra. All the obsessing was really unnecessary. Maybe the planning part was helpful, but the obsessing is extra. And I think when we're anticipating something in the future, something really difficult, like maybe a really tough, direct conversation with someone, or maybe a health issue or something like that, we look to the future and we imagine ourselves being overwhelmed. But that moment of being overwhelmed usually doesn't happen. Usually when the thing comes, do you know what we do? We deal with it. We adjust. We have new parameters. We have new limitations imposed by the situation. And we deal with the new situation no matter what it is. And it's like, oh, this isn't that sort of thing I imagined where I just don't have control. No, I'm still moving forward. And we see that all of that fear and all of that lamenting, all of that lamentation just wasn't necessary. So don't lament the dry September, water the trees. Don't lament your illness. Get your rest and do what you can within your parameters. Don't lament the election. See if you can turn your anxiety into activism. You will adjust to the new parameters, whatever they are. Even if your candidate doesn't win and things look really pretty bleak, you will adjust. You will move forward and you won't be alone. That's always what happens. And the good news here, and it'll probably surprise no one that I say this at the end of my talk, is that our Zen practice helps us to do just what's needed, to not create additional suffering by anticipating things that we can't control. Through meditation, we become familiar with how our minds operate, and we realize that, oh, we have some control over what goes on up here. And we can learn through sitting meditation, moment to moment, to let go of the past, let go of the future, and just be present and inquire again and again. What is it? What is it now? What is it now? And that moment to moment practice, when we learn to do that, can really affect the big picture as well. If we're good at the moment to moment, we're likely, maybe just through some kind of process of osmosis, to not obsess about that big looming thing in the future, because our mind gets out of the habit of endlessly running on sort of that hamster wheel of speculation and fear. We're more likely to say, I can't do anything about that right now, but what I can do is pay attention to what is right in front of me. And I'm so inspired by folks in our Sangha who just keep sitting day after day, working on that moment to moment presence. And I'm so inspired by folks in our Sangha who meet really large difficulties with great equanimity. Sometimes I'm just astonished at how that happens. So we can do that. We can just do the practice. We can do the sitting. We can work toward having a regular sitting practice. And for folks who are new, you may not know it, but we have a myriad of supportive practices. We don't just meditate. We have walking meditation. We have ritual. We have various kinds of ceremonies. We have work practice. We have study. We have community. We have community connections. We do this together. Today's a great day at Zen Center because it's a busy day. Besides the usual sitting and intro and Dharma talk, we have the children's practice, we have the teen group, we have a new member tea, and we have work practice. There's a lot going on. There are places to fit in. Even if you're not ready to meditate, there are lots of entrance points here. So maybe the secret to life is not quite as dramatic as we thought it might be. Maybe it's simply to see clearly and to drop all of the extra stuff and to work within the parameters that you have. And be clear-minded enough to know that those parameters can change every day. What seemed like a limitation yesterday may not be a limitation today. You may break through it. And you never know what positive changes a strange period of time might bring. And that's what I have to say. And I'd be happy to hear from some of you if you have something to say. Folks online, you can just start talking, or you can raise your hand. And folks in the room, let me know if you'd like to say something. Yes, Diana.
Thank you so much for the talk today.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said something last week to me that really stuck to me, and I feel it connects very well to what you were saying. It is everybody's first time living this life. And with that approach, you can find it in yourself to just be here, be now, and enjoy what's here. Always have in mind what's coming, because we have busy lives as adults, but
Sure.
But make it your focus emotionally to just be here and do what you can right now. And I appreciate hearing that from you too.
Yeah, that's really nice. What was that? Everyone is.
This is everybody's first time living this life.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I actually think that's what I was kind of trying to say, because I think the ethnic slur might be rather a challenge to Hui-Neng to can he or is he already internalizing the ethnic slurring and the ethnic slurs and can he see himself as see them in his mirror? That's a little vague, but can he see them? Can he see himself as them? They're showing up in his mirror. He's showing up in their mirror. But that's confusing. But the general then chasing Hui-Neng is Hui-Neng says, yeah, you can have the robe, but the robe includes maniac generals chasing you. So if you want this robe, here it is. And by the way, the teaching is maniac generals will chase you. And so he has to, the general then has to internalize himself. And so then I think that actually they mirror each other, the ethnic slur and the maniac chasing, really the same thing. And they're all in the mirror and the mirror and the robe, really the same thing. So we get to this backing of all being, which is the mirror and the robe. Possibility.
Thank you. Thanks for the comment, Steve. Yes,
I
Barbara.
just want to thank you because you talked about fear. And it's so often, if you pay attention to your fears, so often you find that the end result is not what you expected. And I had a friend who recently asked me about fear. And I said, it's kind of like a fog. It dissipates as you enter it.
Yeah, it's true. Our practice is to go toward the fear, we say. We do that carefully. Sometimes you have to do it in stages. Sometimes you need someone there with you. But when you flee from it, it kind of grows. When you go toward it, you can see how it's empty. Yeah. That tends to happen when you're sitting because everything comes up when you're sitting, eventually. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I was just going to share, this is sort of related. I heard a child psychologist say that when a 4-year-old has a big emotion, they can only manage to experience it for something like 2 minutes at a time. And so your practice isn't to, with a kid who's going through a big emotion, isn't to make their big emotions go away. It's to make sure you don't keep resetting the timer. And I don't have kids other than my 2 cats, but I do this for myself a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. Tanya,
Good morning, Ted.
good morning.
You brought in these beautiful peppers. My question is, during your month-long illness, how did you relate to your gardening practice? Because that perhaps was something that was a little bit more challenging for you.
Yeah. I think my gardening practice was really, really helpful during that time because it was kind of a routine thing. I'm really a creature of routines. And whenever I feel kind of out of sorts, I'm like, well, what should I be doing now? What's the next thing, you know? And so naturally, even though I wasn't feeling well, I would go outside and I had to do the watering, right? It was really dry. And so I had to look after things. So there was something just very reassuring about that. You know, that's something I love about monastic life and daily life at home. They can be similar. It's like, well, you just do the next thing. You know, you don't always have to make a big deal out of everything. It's like, well, it's time to water the lawn, or I hear the han and it's time to go sit. And I find that very reassuring and kind of grounding. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Last call. Leo.
How many more days till the election?
24 sounds about right. I don't know.
I have a lot of anxiety about it.
Mhm.
I have a lot of fear. I think a lot of people in here feel the same way. What's gonna happen? 1932, there was an election. Franklin Roosevelt was elected first time as president. January, his inauguration says, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I never understood what that meant, but fear is good. The feeling of being afraid is good. It's what kept us, our ancestors, in a cave at night, rather than going out in the dark, knowing that there was an animal wanting to have this ancestor for dinner.
Yeah.
You know, fear is what keeps you if you're walking along in the dark at night and you hear something behind you. Fear is what makes you turn around and look and either fight or flight. So fear is a good thing. So, but it's hard to not be afraid of this. So back in the 80s or 90s, I think there was a pretty irritating song, Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. I think we have to live our lives knowing that things will get better eventually. Whatever happens in 3 weeks, things will get better.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I think that this is really interesting because we are designed to be afraid, right? By evolution, kind of our biological makeup. It was a survival trait back then, but we weren't. There were no elections in the cave, right? There were 100 people or less, so yeah, it was a very different world that we live in. Some of those survival traits back then might not be survival traits now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can be a little too persistent and what was once necessary for survival sometimes becomes a difficulty. Sure. Yes.
I have a question. Normally when you are like feeling fear about anything in the future, it can feel very like solidified, if that's a good word for it, but very just real. And sometimes it can be hard to trust leaning into fear or leaning into the negative situation because the feeling is like, you know, it feels like, you know, my outcome is gonna happen. So what makes it easier to trust that it's not just gonna, you know, go the bad way or go the negative? I guess, yeah, how does it not feel negative? How do you trust not feeling that negative outcome? Because when I was hearing that story about the amount of people, it just didn't make sense that hundreds of people could change their minds and just go, you know, that the probability of that is very low. And so I don't know, I couldn't trust those people not coming after me. I couldn't trust in that not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. How do you trust? I think, you know, we kind of need to begin, we need a realistic assessment of the situation. Like Leo was saying, I mean, fear really has a place, you know. The fear is telling us something. We really need to consider, well, do I need to be fearful? And Hui-Neng had to be serious about that and think, well, I really do need to keep moving here because something bad could happen. And how could I don't know if it's quite a matter of trusting that everything is going to be okay, because you can't be certain that everything can be okay. But I think it's a matter of kind of sorting out which of your mental activity is helpful and which is not helpful.
Right.
You know, if you've sort of planned, well, if they catch up with me, here's what I'm going to do, that's good. And you rethink that and you refine the plan a little bit. Then you think about it again, and then, you've been through it 32 times. It's quite time to stop
Yeah,
because I can't fix that now.
right.
And then you can get off into speculating, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? So, I mean, I guess you trust in the possibility that everything may work out well, but it's kind of a matter of not indulging in that unhelpful mental activity.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, I guess the way I feel about it is it would be easier to trust in all possibilities than just the negative one.
Right.
It's very easy to be like, oh, 100 people are mad at me, they are going to do this, this is going to happen. But if you trust in all possibilities, then you're not focusing on just that, you're seeing it as it is.
Yeah, I think that's very good. And we do get kind of stuck in only the negative possibilities.
Yeah,
And one thing we really exclude is there's a possibility that something wonderful could come out of this negative situation. I mean, some of the best things that have happened to me in my life started with a whole lot of agony.
yeah. You really didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Something related with that comment, for me, help me is because I going through like a lot of things that create so much fear in me. What helped me a lot was disconnect to thinking that that is actually negative. When you say you plan for it, but the disconnection is like this necessary. My experience and what I've been hearing is this is a negative thing. What about if it's not negative or positive? What about if it's just a thing? I plan for when that thing is here. Okay, my plan, okay. But the disconnection for me of that line that is connected with negative, with good aligns, like, yep, I will not treat this as a negative or positive. I treat this as something, all right.
Yeah.
How I can plan to and disconnect with my outcome. Like maybe I have an idea what's the perfect way to go. No, disconnect with that too. Just plan for the thing to arrive. It's here, what I can do. And that has been helping me so much lately.
Right.
So much.
Great. And sometimes I think we're not real good at knowing whether something is positive or negative. Because we have our ideas of how things should be. Yeah.
It's so true.
Thanks. Ginny.
Feel silly following that.
No, please do. Good stuff.
I'll share, in the election space, which is where I work, not on the political side, on the administrative side. I feel fortunate because I've had the lesson repeatedly every single year we run an election that my work does not depend on the outcome of the election. What's important for me every day is just to take care of the thing that is in front of me right now. And of course, this fits in really well with our Zen practice. We plan for every election. Every year we come up with a plan for how we're going to do the work that we need to do. And then inevitably something happens that we didn't think of. And then we're in the midst of it. Maybe it's election day and we have immovable deadlines and we just have to figure it out in the moment. And when I say we, I'm thinking of all the people I work with as a team. We pull together and we just do it. So like as an example, every year we go through this emergency planning kind of thing where we think of all of our worst case scenarios and come up with a plan to deal with it if it happens. And prior to 2020, my former boss, every single year, he was like, pandemic, we gotta figure out what we need to do, because there's a big one coming, we're due. And every year we'd be like, all right, Mark, sure. There'll be a pandemic, I'm sure that's at the top of our priority list. And then, of course, it happened. And I'll tell you, even though that was on our list and we thought about it, we had no concept of how we were actually going to make it through that.
Yeah.
So when we were in it, we just pulled together and each day just dealt with what there was.
Yeah.
So that is my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe one more? Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm hanging on the word extra. Because you said all of that, basically all of that other stuff, the fear, the worry is extra. And I have so much extra. I just love that, like using that, because that is, to me, that is this practice, right? Is that like, it's all that, it's the narratives that are, you know, I'm such a lovely creative imagination. And all of these stories, right? That I love what you shared too, that like, I am a risk mitigator, and I think of everything, and then something happens that I didn't think of, or the plan that I had doesn't work anyway. So I love this idea of like, I want to walk around and catch myself with these extras, like, stop that, that's extra, you know, like, and
Right.
just that, like, it's very simple, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that's not my word. Does anybody know, was it Katagiri or was it Suzuki who would talk about things being extra? Does anybody know kind of the origin of that?
There's a particular story about somebody's passing, and the student was asking why. And he said, why is extra?
Why is extra? Why is extra? Yeah, thank you, Cato. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Let's turn this over to our esteemed Doan.